You're praying? You're live. We're live. Okay. Okay. So everyone who just tuned in on our live audience, we are just beginning now. If you are enrolled in the course, your course setting and go into the PowerPoints where you can watch as we're going to be going through the PowerPoints together. So in today's class, we're doing the following. We're doing an introduction to the laws of Basar beChalav. And we are also going to begin chapter 87. There were some questions that someone already addressed us, but most of those questions will be covered as we go through the material, so it's usually premature to ask questions in the material before we do the material. As we go through the material, we will discover the answers. But there was one question that was asked, which is dealt with in the very beginning of the book, before we enter the introduction, and that I think was a very valid and important question to ask. So I want to address that. When people first learn Tzemach, they often become very confused, and I did mention this a few times regarding the various opinions that they see. Mainly, the opinions that we're going to be seeing is the Mechaber, the Ramah, the Shach, the Taz. We'll see some pre-Chadashes, we'll see some pre-Megadims, we'll see some Taz I mentioned, we'll see some Graz, we'll see some Chaya'ad, Chochmas Adams, we'll see Rishonim, the Arzarua, the Issa V'Heter, the Teres Chatos. And there's two issues here that comes up. Issue number one is that most people, and I speak from personal inexperience when I first did Tzemach, have no clue who these people are. Not biographical, not in terms of their dates, when they lived, or in terms of their statures. To such a point that I remember, I had already known this, but one of my chavrusas did not. And he asked me, regarding the Teres Chatos, which is mentioned so many times, he had a question on a certain shach based on the Teres Chatos. And the answer to that question was understanding that the Teres Chatos is the Ramah. He authored another book called the Teres Chatos. So people didn't know basic history of the Poskim. So that's why in the very beginning of my book, even the old version, in all my Tzemach books, I already included a biography, a short biography, just to know the basics of who's who are the players here that we're going to be meeting. And the Bach, the Shal, and other two big names. And the second point is, so I strongly advise everyone to read through this. It's not part of your requirements in the course. You're not going to be tested on which year did the Taz live in. We're not going to be doing that, but it's obviously for your own personal information. It's extremely important to understand. It's not like the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch where you're only dealing with one person and one person giving you the information. You don't need to know everything else. He took care of everything. He filtered everything in. But here that we're going to be meeting all these names, it's important to have some historical background understanding of who's who. And also in the book, in the next page, these 2 pages is a short summary of each one. And then the next page is a chronological order of Poskim, of Rishonim and Poskim, of names that you will meet in this class from the 1100s until the 1900s. That's the next page, if you look at the next page. So we have Rashi, the Rif, Ha'aruch, the Rashbam, Ha'eshkol. These are all in the 1100s.
Just very quickly, your father-in-law says he's not seeing the... We're live, it's all looking normal on this side, so I don't know what's going on here.
הכפתור העיקרי, לא העיר החיצוני, זה חיתוי של כל זה, בסדר? אלא שני. סוס, מאיזה מקור טוב? מה שתחפש עם זה?
סורס, אוקיי.
הנה. זה נראה לי הראשון.
אז אני לוחץ על זה?
אני לוחץ על זה, ואינטנט בזה. יש פה חיצים, אתה רואה?
כן.
רגע. אז זה. Menu.
אבל גם
משך, אתה צריך לשפל את המסך.
לא, אמור את השלט, אני לא יודע איפה לשלט. כנראה יש אחד.
Oh,
you did it, look at that.
okay.
אז אני אסביר עוד פעם.
כן.
סורס.
Source.
שמאי אחד. עכשיו, כדי להגיע לזה, עם החיצים, יש פה שתי כפתורים בחיצים, ואז לוחצים על פלוס, יש פה ווליום כאילו. יש חיצים ויש פלוס מינוס.
לעלות ולרדת שם.
הפלוס זה כאילו בחירה, בסדר?
אוקיי.
סורס, לבחור בווליום, בחיצים, כלפי מעלה HDMI 1, ללחוץ על פלוס. פלוס זה עושה את זה. זהו. את זה תשמעו לכם פה, ותשתדל לא למשוך את זה.
Okay.
קשה לחבר את זה.
Okay, thank you very much. That was our class on electronics, and we will now be returning to the main messages for the day. We apologize to our audience for that. We now have on the screen, everyone can see the PowerPoints. Okay, right now we're not yet in the PowerPoint. We are just right now in the preface of the Paiskim, and we're now basically just meeting who's who. So again, whenever you see a name, you would like to know who this is, or even if you don't want to know who it is, I suggest you should know who he is. You have right here a list. I listed here most of the names that you will be seeing, just to know where it's from. Is he a Rishon? Is he a Achron? Otherwise, a person can, say, well, the Rabbi says this, the Hamar says this, and the Shevet Halevi says this. Shevet Halevi lived 20 years ago, and the Hamar was a Rishon that lived in the 1100s. So you need to know who's who. That's some basic concept. Now, the second point of the question was when we have debates and disputes, what do? The Rashal has one opinion, the Bach has another, the Taz has another. He was, by the way, his son-in-law. He was the son-in-law of the Bach. They didn't agree all the time, let me just put it mildly. And the Ramah has his opinion, the Shach has his opinion, the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber has his opinion. So it's as follows. So I wrote, this last paragraph was dedicated to that right here. I'll just read it out loud. Sfardim, how do we rule in a case of dispute? Sfardim in general follow the rulings of the Mechaber over that of the Ramah, Shach, and Taz, whether to be lenient or stringent. So that's a general ruling for Sfardim, they follow the Mechaber. So whenever we're going to go through the Mechaber rules a certain way, that's generally how the Sfardim will be ruling. Now, since we are Am Ashkenazi and we're generally all Ashkenazi here, we will be focusing on the Ashkenazi ruling, okay? But furthermore, even for Sfardim, there are instances that they are stringent like other opinions, like the Shach or the Taz or the Ramah, and that's where the Sephardi Svarim, such as the Ben Ish Chai, the Pri Chadash, the Tzedek, the Shulchan Aruch, the Be'Kayos, and the Kaf HaChaim all come in. All these Svarim I just mentioned are Sephardi Paiskim, written over the last 300 years. Kaf HaChaim is the latest one. He's after the Ben Ish Chai. He published his book in the 1920s in Jerusalem, and he is one of the most authoritative books for arbitration for Sfardim that exists. Also for Ashkenazim, I may say, but definitely for Sfardim. So if a Sfardi wants to know, even though the Mechaber, I read that the Mechaber rules a certain way, do I actually follow this? Open up the Kaf HaChaim, he'll give you the full lowdown of it. And if he concludes that way, if he says, V'kach noagim ha-Sfardim u'bnei Edut HaMizrach, you know that that's the halacha. But as he often does, he may bring a whole bunch of Achreidim, Sfardi Achreidim, which will say, no, we're machmir in this like the Ramah. It's known that the Ben Ish Chai was often stringent like the Ramah and like the Shach in different cases. So it's not so simple, it's not so simplistic just to say, Sfardim always follow the Mechaber and that's it. It really depends. The Rabbi Yosef Kara, the Shulchan Aruch. It's written over there in the paragraph. The Shulchan Aruch, okay? If you read the paragraph I write there, his rulings of the Shulchan Aruch are commonly referred to as the Mechaber, or the author. In the first paragraph there it's written. So, a good question. Okay, so those are the different names of the people, and that's a Sfardim. Now what about Ashkenaz? By Ashkenazi, it's kind of a little more difficult because often we'll have a dispute between the Ramah and the Shach, or between the Shach and the Taz. How do we rule? Now, this is a dispute not just of today, this is a dispute since they lived. The Taz was older than the Shach. And in fact, they had what's called Vad Arba Aratzos. That was the official What's the word I'm looking for? Autonomous. What's the word, Yehuda?
Autonomous sounds okay.
Autonomous?
Was independent?
It was the Vad Arba Ratzis. It was until
Council of the Four
17. The
Lands.
Council of the Four Lands. That's in English. Yeah, but they had autonomous rule in those areas. They were the final rulers. They were the government for the Jews in Europe at that time, and so they unanimously voted to rule like the Taz over the Shach. But that didn't stick. It became abolished and dissolved in 1756, I think, the Vad Arba Ratzis, and then every man went for himself. And bottom line today, the general leaning is to favor the rulings of the Shach over that of the Taz. They had some great debates, especially in Basar beChalav, and they had debates of the debates later on. There's the secret pages of the debates are found in what's called Kuntras Achron in the back of the Shulchan Aruch. They don't print it in the actual area of the halachas. And sometimes there's some very fierce languages that are used in those debates. In any event, but they had respect for each other, tremendous respect for each other, especially Taz was older. But the leaning is usually like the ruling of the Shach. But bottom line is that we don't use that as the rule. The rule is that to know how to paskin, we got to look at the achreinim, such as, again, the Kaf HaChaim. He also helps us understand how to arbitrate. He's like an encyclopedia. He brings all the opinions. So when he brings you that, let's say the Shach and Taz argued, and he brings you 15 later achreinim who all ruled like the Taz, then we're going to be machman like the Taz. Likewise, the Pri Megadim is another major player that arbitrates for us. Likewise, you have, of course, the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch sometimes arbitrates on matters in Basar beChalav, even though we don't have a Shulchan Aruch. If we had a Shulchan Aruch in Basar beChalav, we wouldn't be going through this because he would arbitrate everything we need to know. So we wouldn't have to know how do we pass him in the Shach versus the Taz. That was his job. That's what he was hired. But since we don't have a Shulchan Aruch, we have to go through the other ways. This book usually takes care of that. The purpose of this book was, in addition to many of its functions and features, was also to give a bottom line halacha to know how to paskin. So usually there's always a summary at the end which summarizes the bottom line. And sometimes we are left without arbitration, and you need to ask a shayla to a Rav. Now, how do you paskin? For yourself, you need to ask a Rav, because in a case of machlekes like that, it needs to go to a Rav who has broader knowledge and knows also the klali hapsika, the general rules of ruling, and often it depends on the situation. If there's a case of loss or great loss, there's different factors that come in that are limited and not brought in this book. So in a case where we conclude that this is an even debate without arbitration, and that's where a Rav would need to be contacted to see how to rule. Now, what would the Rav do? Once again, the Rav would have to use klali hapsika. If it's an Issa D'Oraisa, it would be machmer, Issa D'Rabbanan. But again, there's different, that's already beyond this class to go into. But in general, most cases are arbitrated in the book, and you will know how to practice. Okay, let's begin our introduction. So as we see here, we have a delicious piece of flesh and a glass of milk with a fence. I don't know which one is the one in the prison, but one of them is incarcerated, and that's representing meat and milk not coming together. That's as close as they get. Okay, the uniqueness of the laws of Basar beChalav within the laws of Kashrus. Those who have a book, we're on page 23 in the new edition. And some of this is going to be repetitive from last week. Today we're officially starting, and it's as follows. So I'm reading from on the board over here. Oop, I did not mean to do that. Let's get back. There we go. The laws of Kashrus are many and complex. In the Shulchan Aruch Yeredeya, which is where we are, the laws of Kashrus contain over 150 chapters. To be exact, I'll tell you. It starts from Siman Aleph until Siman Kuf Mem, which ends the laws of Yain Nesach. Till then, that's 140 chapters, just Kashrus. After that, it begins the laws of Avodah Zarah, and it goes into a whole bunch of fun topics. Then it goes back to Kashrus again. From chapter 290, 294, it begins the laws of Arla, the laws of Kilayim, and then it goes into laws of Bechar, firstborn animals. It goes into the laws of Trumas and Meiser, so a lot of Hafrashas Chala. So that's from about 190. That's from 294 until 332. So it's more than 150. It's about 170 chapters on kashrus. Okay, Basar beChalav is just 11 of this 170. So one thing is to know to be a little bit humble, even after we pass the Basar beChalav class. Don't say I'm an expert. I'm a kashrus expert now, and I did a course. I'm we're doing a small portion of it. While in today's times, much of these laws are dealt with only by kashrus agencies and their operatives. So much of the 150 plus chapters that I mentioned, they're dealt with in the kashrus agencies. Why do you need to know shchita? Why do you need to know treifus? Why do you need to know about afrashas matanas? Why do you need to know melicha? Why do you need to know yain nesef? Most of these things, you do have to know a little bit. Most of these things are dealt with in the kashrus agencies. But the laws of Basar beChalav retain relevance to all Jews, even in the privacy of their home. You need to know how to run a Jewish kitchen. So of all the halachas of kashrus, of the whole 170 chapters, this is the most common and relevant and most important to learn first. Okay? Thus, the laws of Basar beChalav remain one of the most relevant topics of kashrus today for every Jew to know and be an expert in. Number 2, we're in the gray box. That's why I'm making it a little bigger. Making it bigger. I'm in the slideshow. That's why it wasn't so big. You guys should have told me. Now we're in the slideshow. I was wondering why it wasn't. Okay. There we are. Aside from this unit better, you can read it.
A little bit.
No? A little bit? Maybe I'll make the words bigger next time. Maybe there's a way of...
There's a higher contrast in the colors, maybe.
Yeah, maybe I'll make it instead of white.
That's the answer. Yeah, something to do with my vision.
Okay. So aside from this unique relevance and practicality, we also find some unique halachic aspects delegated to Basar beChalav, which is unprecedented in any other area of kashrus. So we discussed this last week, and we're going to repeat. The prohibition of Basar beChalav is the only kashrus prohibited food that contains an innate cooking prohibition irrelevant of when eating the food, as we'll discuss in length in this chapter of 87, the cooking prohibition. It is the only kashrus prohibition that contains a cooking prohibition. If you cook pork but didn't eat it, you transgress nothing. Any non-kosher food that you cook, you don't transgress. But chametz on Pesach is a different story because you have an issur of owning it. But I'm saying if you cook, the action of cooking by any other kashrus food is never an issue. Number 2, it's the only, what else is unique about it? This we did not touch upon last week. It is the only kashrus food that starts off as kosher and only afterwards becomes treif. There's nothing else. Everything is either black or white. You're either for or against. You don't begin being for and then become against. You don't begin kosher and then turn treif, unless, of course, something non-treif infiltrated you, but that's because the non-treif is inside you now. But something doesn't become intrinsically non-kosher if it was originally kosher, except for Basar beChalav. We're going to now repeat the synopsis of the topics under discussion. We did this last week. Here you have it already in the PowerPoint. So if you ever want to see the map of where we're going, what we're learning, it's very important to have a map of the information. This is a map of all the chapters that we're going to be going through, and I'll repeat again. The laws of Basar beChalav are found in the Shulchan Aruch today between chapters 87 and 97 and contain several topics. The forms of meat and milk that are defined to be under the prohibition, that's in chapter 87. We'll be discussing that today. The details of the cooking prohibition are also in chapter 87. The prohibition of benefit from the forbidden mixtures are also in chapter 87. Eating meat and milk on the same table, that's the next chapter 88. Eating meat and milk, milk and meat one after the other is chapter 89. Having separate utensils and appliances for meat and milk, I said, is scattered amongst various chapters and in the most part is not even written. We have a special chapter in that book on that. You want to maybe open it? Chapter 7. Show them. No, not yours. I took some business classes. I had to separate the goods in 2 different books. Make you buy both of them. Chapter 7. This is chapter 7. Read. What does it say?
It says the laws of kitchen utensils are applied.
So this is not, as I said last week, you're not going to find this explicit in the Shulchan Aruch. You're not going to find that in this book either, as for the reason I explained last week. We will be learning in this course, as I mentioned, so that's it's scattered around, and we will go through that entire chapter eventually. Taruvas, mixtures of Basar beChalav. So this is the main bulk of Basar beChalav. This is the main bulk of the complexity, and where the rabbis love asking their questions to test you. And that is cold mixtures is chapter 91. Hot mixtures is 92 through 94. And then we have discussion of parav, the laws of parav that was cooked in a meat or dairy vessel. The laws of charav, those are chapters 95 and 96. So that's the map of where we're heading, where we are. If you ever feel like you're lost, we did already 30 classes. Where have we come from and where are we going to? Go to this slide, you'll see it. 97. 97 is discussing also, it's a unique chapter dealing with bread that's been kneaded with milk or meat and what its status is. So that's its own little subject. It's very small. It's the smallest chapter in the whole bulk of them. Okay, we'll begin with something easy, which is not explicitly written anywhere in the actual source material in the Shulchan Aruch. And that is the number of commands of Taryag mitzvahs that Basar beChalav is listed as. So, someone who eats a non-kosher animal, all of those non-kosher animals are listed under one biblical negative command. That you're not allowed to eat something that doesn't chew its cud and have split hooves. So whether a person eats a pork or a person eats lion meat, or etc., they all fall under that same negative command. Basar beChalav is its own unique negative command. The question is, how many? So the number of commands, including the prohibition of meat and milk, is debated amongst the Moinei HaMitzvahs. Moinei HaMitzvahs is the general term that we use for those Rishonim, and even prior to Rishonim, the times of the Go'ainim, just for everybody to know, the term Rishonim usually refers to years 1000 after the Common Era until year 1450, 1500. 1500 already begins early Achronim period. Okay, but that period of 500 years, 400 years is our Rishonim period. Prior to that is called the Go'ainim. Not completely prior, but 200-300 years from 700 to 1000 is called the period of the Go'ainim. So Minyan HaMitzvahs, books that count the Taryag mitzvahs, began being written by the Go'ainim. Famously, we have the Sefer of the Rasag Gaon. He wrote a hymn, a song, a short song that includes within it all the Taryag mitzvahs. There's a book written on it by Rav Perlo, and that book is 3 volumes and thousands of pages to explain what he is saying. But that's how it was first written. He listed it in a song of the Rasag. And after him came the Rambam. The Rambam wrote Sefer HaMitzvahs. We have also the Smag, Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos, the Sefer HaChinuch. So there's a number of Rishonim who took upon themselves to list the 613 commands. And they don't always agree. Everyone agrees at 613. No one argues on the number. The question is what's included. So we're going to see this debate regarding Basar beChalav. So while everyone is in agreement that meat and milk is biblically prohibited in cooking, eating, and benefiting, there's disagreement as to how many mitzvahs these prohibitions are to be counted as amongst the 365 negative commands. Some authorities count the prohibition as a single negative command. They say it's all considered one negative command. That's the Rasag and the Bahag. Both are Go'ainim. They were in the Go'ainic period. They listed all as one, which I think is what most people will tell you. Most people you ask, and I think that's what you probably thought before you into this class. Right? How many of the 613 is listed as one? Others count it as 2 negative commands, one against cooking and one against eating, which also includes against benefit. So I say eating and benefit is one, but there's 2 separate negative commands. There's a negative command against cooking and a second separate negative command against eating. That's the opinion of the Chinuch, the Sefer HaChinuch, and of the Rambam. The Rambam listed it as 2 commands. Okay. Others counted as 3 negative commands. That's the Rashbatz. He listed as 3: 1 against cooking, one against eating, 1 against benefiting. Now the Shulchan Aruch doesn't weigh in on this matter because it has no practical ramification. Shulchan Aruch is written, as we know, 500 years ago, and at that time we didn't yet have the Beis HaMikdash, and he wrote it for the times of God. So when Mashiach comes, then the those who execute the lashes will have to have an arbitration on this debate, because they need to know if somebody cooked and ate basar beChalav and then sold the rest that he didn't finish eating. Did he transgress all three and need to get a set of 39 times 3 lashes, or does he get 3 for the price of 1? So this is not relevant today, and therefore there is no arbitration. And for the time being, there is no practical ramification of the halacha that we would need to know an arbitration on this score.
Is there any other place in the Torah where there's a pasuk that would in and of itself count as one, and there's 3 of these?
Absolutely. There's many cases of mitzvahs in the Torah which everyone is in agreement that it's not counted as one of the 613, and at times they're in debate if it is, and this is a classical example. Here they're debating. There's many other cases of the like that they have a debate. Okay, the reasons. What are the reasons for the prohibition of eating meat and milk? This is not written in the Shulchan Aruch. This you have to dig into the Mefarshim and other Sfarim to find out. But it's funny because, again, you can be well versed in the Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Basar beChalav from Pei Zayin, but miss out on some pretty fundamental information. Like, what's all this for? Why are we keeping all this? Why did God want us to keep it?
What's the first one?
Yeah, I'm going to explain each one.
Okay.
That was just the intro. So we have here listed on the board 5 different reasons. This everyone can read. This is good enough.
No, this is good.
Great. Okay. Chayk. So some explain, this is Rabbeinu Bechaya and the Sefer HaChinuch and the Kli Yakar. They explain that the mitzvah of Isra basar beChalav, the mitzvah of not eat basar beChalav, is a chayk. It precisely does not have a reason. That's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a chayk. It's something that's above our intellect and understanding. This doesn't mean that, in general, chayk doesn't mean that God decided to make illogical commands because he wants chukim. He wants to have a status of commands that are illogical, so he asked for, people with the lowest IQ in the spiritual worlds to come up with the dumbest commands possible, and he picked them because he wants commands that's not the pshat. The pshat is that they're so high and the reasons are so deep and sublime and abstract that it's not grasped by human intellect. That's what a chayk is. Mm-hmm. So not only does it have a reason, it has the deepest possible reasons, just beyond human intellect. So we don't understand it. So that's the opinion of the Summary Shain. Others say, and this is the opinion of the Rashbam, that God forbade it due to cruelty, as it's bad enough that we got to slaughter animals and take their lives. The cow Bessie, she was brought up from day one, a nice big cow. Suddenly you're chopping her up, eating her for lunch. So, okay, we understand people need to eat, people need protein, okay. But then to cook her in her kid, let's say this kid in her mother's milk, that's just very cruel. It's cruel to take it to the next step and not have any sensitivity. So this is his opinion, that because literally the pasuk says, don't cook the kid in the mother's milk. So he's learning that the Torah views it that way, says it that way, because it's trying to teach us that there's an aspect of cruelty to cook the meat, the animal, in its source of food and living. We need to be a little bit sensitive. Number 3, idolatry. So this famously was said by the Rambam in Meir Nevuchim. The Rambam in Meir Nevuchim had a goal to try to explain the mitzvahs in a very philosophical and intellectual manner. And here he writes the following, that it used to be in biblical times that idol worshippers, and mainly their priests, had a custom of cooking meat and milk together. I guess there was a special custom that they used to do with meat and milk. And then because the Torah distances the Jewish people from idolatry and practices of idolatry, so therefore when the Torah was given, they prohibited cooking meat and milk. We have now some deeper explanations which begin touching upon metaphysics and Kabbalah. So, Rabbeinu Bechaya gives another explanation behind the issue of eating meat and milk, and he says the following. Eating milk with meat numbs the heart and the soul, just as is caused upon eating blood. The Torah prohibits one from eating blood. And the reason why the Torah prohibits one from eating blood is because it says in the pasuk, Ki dam hanefesh, ki nefesh habasar badamhi. As the soul, flesh is inside a person's blood. And when a person eats blood, he ends up consuming the soul. So now I think we can all agree that cows, their meat may taste good, but they're not the most polite human beings. They're not the most polite creations. Especially when they get angry and they gore, they can kill people. And they do. So to have the negative energy of a bull inside of your body is to take your tivus and pump it up on steroids. So that's why the Torah says meat, yes, blood, no. Blood is way, way, way too much negative energy that we're intaking from the animal. I once heard from someone who traveled the world before he became a Baal Tshuva, and he says that in India and China, he knew tribes that before they would go to battle, they would drink blood of snakes in order to give them special cruelty in battle. It says it's like a drug. We know that's what's happening now, right? The source of the disease from snakes. In any event, so blood has a special, it carries with it the soul, and it's very animalistic. The Torah prohibits it. So the Rabbeinu Bechaya says that meat and milk have a similar, when they mix, they have a similar numbingness, they have a similar effect, just like blood. Now it's explained, I explained this over here in the brackets, that also scientifically, the milk of a cow, milk of a human is derived from blood. It extracts from the blood in the bloodstream. And that's why when a woman nurses, she feels weak. It's like someone got a blood test done to them. It's like a causes dam, like bloodletting. Something that us men will never experience. But nonetheless, the idea is that milk is similar to, comes and derives from blood. He says the following: when a person cooks the milk with the meat, Rabbeinu Bechaya says it rearouses the blood tendencies that were originally derived from within the milk. The milk is deduced and derived from blood. And when it's cooked with the meat rearouses those tendencies, so it's as if you're drinking blood. And it has the same negative effects as blood. And then we have the last one, which is sorcery. In Kabbalah, it's explained that meat and milk have two distinct spiritual roots. I can already tell you now, meat is from where? Anyone? Over capitalists? Gvura and Chesed. Milk is from Chesed, and meat is from Gvura. Now, Hashem created the world in a way that there's a system. And you're not allowed to mess around with the system. You're not allowed to hack with the system. When a person cooks meat and milk together, it's as if he took some chemicals from Chesed and mixed it with some chemicals of Gvura, and it can cause an explosion. So this is why it's considered like sorcery, because what is kishuf? What is real kishuf? So the Rambam held sorcery, black magic is just a bunch of nonsense that idiots believe in. But many argued on him and held that sorcery is something real. What sorcery is, it's using powers of impurity to take powers that God embedded in the world and use it for purposes that God did not intend. Meaning to basically be a hacker, a spiritual hacker. That's what they are. That's what a sorcerer is. So you don't only have to be a witch to be a sorcerer. If you cook Basar, beChalav, you've also in essence become a sorcerer, because you've mixed these two different spheres together in a way that they're not meant to be. Okay. Any questions on this?
Why did you decide to call it sorcery instead of Kabbalah? And you sort of explained it just now.
Well, that's because that's how the Rabbeinu Bechaya calls it, and I wouldn't want to swerve from his titling of it. The mitzvah of meat and milk helped us receive the Torah. This is a very nice medrash to know. We're learning these halachis, that the halachas of Basar beChalav are not just another one of the subjects in Torah, and are not just another one of the subjects in Kashrus, but is actually what is responsible for Matan Torah. How is that? We discussed this in our Shavuos class. Anyone remember? The Medrash Rabbi in Yisrei 28 states, this past week's parsha, Moshe Moses went to heaven, And if you think he was met with fanfare and people cheering him like the president coming to town, it was just the opposite. It was like he was met by many protesters. The angels, they were screaming and shouting, "What is a mortal man doing up here receiving a godly gift?" Tanu ha'itchal shamayim, they said to God, give us the present. And we know the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos goes through the debate that went up upstairs. But there's also the version of the Medrash of the debate. And the Medrash says, and in essence what's explained is that there were two debates. There was debate by the first luchos and debate by the second luchos. The Medrash says, and this was by the second luchos, that Moshe Rabbeinu was asked to reply to their claims. And Hashem decided to be his attorney. And Hashem said to the angels, how can you ask? How do you have the audacity to ask for the Torah to be given to you when you don't keep the little bit that you had ability to keep? So what do you mean? We never broke the Torah. He says, well, let me show you a little story written in Parshas Vayera. Remember that story? Remember that old guy you visited many years ago? Sure, Abraham. He was great host. What did he feed you guys? Well, he offered us tongue and he offered us, lemonade. What else? Milk. And did you enjoy your meat and milk meal? And in great shame, they understood they didn't keep the Torah when they had the first chance to do so. So they had nothing to reply, and Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people. This is the message.
They didn't have the Torah yet, so how could they have gotten it right?
So 1 second. They had ability to. They're asking for the gift. Why didn't you try to keep it when you had ability to keep it before it was going to be given away? Why didn't you bid yourself? Why didn't you make yourself a candidate? Anyway, so this is what it says. Bottom line is that there's many questions. Of course, angels, they're chayiv into mitzvahs, and also they didn't eat it together. They went after the other. We discussed this in length in previous classes, and in the book you have the Alter Rebbe's explanation on this, as recorded by Rabbi Horowitz, who was the first Chabad Rav of the Tzfat community in the early 1900s. So that's over there. We're not going to go through that here, but for further info, you can read that up. We have a video on that online also. That's the end of our introduction. We're not done with the class. We will begin chapter 87 today. Okay, so we're going to get started. Okay. I'm actually downloading it, so we have it in PowerPoint itself. We'll have more features available. It's an actual PowerPoint. So we'll see. Those who have a book, we're on page 26. Chapter 87, page 26. Okay, while he gets his act together, I'll just do it from here. Okay, so Siman Pezai. The three Torah verses discuss Basar beChalav. Oh, here we go. I need to enable editing. I just want to make this into a. Oh, how did that happen? He's having a brain freeze, it looks like. So, let me get that together. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going to go through the verses in the Torah. That's the first thing we want to do. I'm sorry. It's been very slow. Whoa. What did it do to me? Okay, we're getting out of this. I'm sorry, guys. That was, so I was trying to do something. So let's get back into this. Maybe this will work. Okay.
It's more like it.
Yeah. No, we're back. Okay. Shmais, so we have it 3 places. Shmais, Parshas, and Mishpatim. This week's Parsha, what a week to begin, huh? What a week to begin learning the laws. The first time, this week's Parsha, what is Gach about this? Then we have Shmais, Parshas, Kisisa, second time, and Dvarim, Parshas, a third time. I'm going to read through each one. Shmais, Mishpatim, Chav Gimel, Yotes, Le'sizbach, Chachames, Dam Zichi, Le'en Chalav Chagi, and Boker. Right, so the pasuk is going through about 4 different commands in this pasuk. Don't bring the carbon Pesach and Erev Pesach if you still own chametz. Don't allow my sacrifice, my offering, eat all the meat. Don't let the carbon Pesach stay past the morning. Bring bikurim and don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. And we have it again in Kisisa. Again, etc. A complete repetition. And then we have again in Re'eh, it's talking about kashrus here. Yeah, that's the topic. Don't eat non-kosher meat. You should give it to the convert, or you should sell it to a guy. And then it concludes, so first of all, what's very interesting is the randomness of the command. It's like talking about a totally different subject. It's like a guy giving a speech about, I don't know, about the economy, and all of a sudden he says, don't cook kid in his mother's milk. Very, very random. And it's repetitive, redundant in 3 different bases. And what we need to figure out is why the redundancy, what is the reason behind it. Get our slideshow back. Map of the chapter. This is the map of the chapter 87, Pei Zayin, okay? So this chapter is going to go through 3 things. Number 1, the 3 prohibitions of cooking, eating, and benefiting. Now, I know you said, well, we did it already 50 times. We said there's 3 prohibitions. What more is there? No, there's details. There's details of the cooking prohibition. There's details of the eating prohibition. There's details of the benefit prohibition. What does it include? What is considered cooking? What's considered eating? Other than the basic chew and swallow, right? And what's considered benefit. Derech bishul, which is basically what's considered the way of cooking. When is something considered cooked? That's going to be integral to our whole discussion. And the third thing is the species of meat and milk of the prohibition, meaning what species of meat and milk carry a prohibition and which do not. So that's the map of the chapter. That's basically what this whole chapter is focused on. Why do we care about the biblical versus rabbinical? This is a very good question. We just concluded previously in the 3rd that we're going to go through, and this is a large portion of this chapter, we can say the main bulk of meat of the chapter is discussing the species of meat and milk, and if they're biblically forbidden, rabbinically forbidden. And I already tell you now, if it was between what's permitted and what's forbidden, I would understand why I need to tell us, but what's permitted is almost zilch. Okay? So why does it matter so much to go through biblical versus rabbinical? Why is it so important? So it's just because usually if there's no practical ramification, it doesn't go into it. So it's as follows. Prohibition against meat and milk is unique in that it is forbidden to be cooked together, eaten together, or benefited from once cooked together. Although the above 3 prohibitions apply by all mixtures of meat and milk, which are biblically forbidden to be eaten, this is a super important slide, guys. This is going to score us throughout the whole chapter. They do not all apply when the mixture is only rabbinically forbidden to be eaten. So we have a major ramification. If a mixture of species of milk and meat is considered only a rabbinical mixture, meaning biblically wasn't included in the prohibition, then it won't be included in the cooking prohibition. There'll be no isser to cook it. And this sometimes can be a real parnasa question. Can I or can I not work in McDonald's? Does cooking the non-kosher meat with cheese in McDonald's consist of a biblical prohibition, which would then be considered under the biblical prohibition of cooking? Or is it only rabbinical? Can I cook in a restaurant in China where they serve snakes and scorpions, etc., with milk? If somebody orders a scorpion shake, they sell them. They have it. They sell in the market there. Scorpions. Yes. No, I don't know scorpion shake. Maybe somebody will take that idea from what I just said about snake shake. But yeah, absolutely. They sell everything that moves, as they say. So can somebody work? I once got this question of someone in India. They wanted to work in a restaurant an exotic restaurant in India for Goyim that they cook different meats, non-kosher meats, not cow meat, God forbid.
In India.
Not in India, no.
It's like, that's their idolatry.
Yeah, but other things that they would eat.
Would chicken and dairy be rabbinically?
Oh, great question. We have a whole chapter to go through. We're going to discover that as well. That is one of the things we will discover, and that's what's important. Is there a difference between making someone's order at McDonald's if he orders, a Mac burger together with a slice of cheese, or if he orders a schnitzel with a slice of cheese? I know they sell schnitzel at McDonald's.
Chicken burger.
Chicken burgers, okay. They don't call it schnitzel.
Don't go.
Okay. It is thus imperative to know which mixtures are only rabbinically forbidden and which contain a biblical prohibition. There's also another thing we're going to learn regarding benefit is between biblical and biblical. So there's various ramifications that exist, and that's why it's so important to get straight which is rabbinical and which is biblical. And we will see some very practical ramifications. I'll give another one for you to know. And anyone here own a pet? Yes?
I did.
You did or you do?
I did. And I got a lot of the around Pesach, a lot of the pet food.
So most people know that you need to get special food for Pesach. Most people don't know that the child is involved also during the regular year. Can you feed non-kosher to your pet? So we're going to learn that there's certain mixtures of Basar beChalav that are forbidden and prohibited for you to feed to your pet. I once saw someone in a store that they were buying a burger and cheese cat food. I told them, what are you doing? Do you know what this is? He says, it's not for me, it's for my cat. I said, I know that. I know it's for your cat. You're not eating from this little can, but it's burger and cheese. Maybe burger and cheese is a biblical prohibition. And if so, it would be under the three big things. First, number one, often they heat it up. Second, you place this can into a microwave or wherever else you want to place it to heat it up. Maybe you're transgressing cooking. And when you feed it to your cat, maybe you're transgressing benefiting. So even if you're not actually consuming any of it, there's still major biblical ramifications and prohibitions that could be relevant. This is why it's very important to go through what are mixtures that are prohibited and which are not, under all three. We'll first discuss differences in the laws between the biblical and biblical prohibitions, and then proceed with explaining which mixtures are defined as being biblically forbidden and which as rabbinical. Okay, do we have time for two more slides? We started a little late. Do we have agreement? About 5 more minutes. Okay, great. So the biblical prohibitions, the following three of the biblical prohibitions we're mentioning all the time. Prohibitions of biblically forbidden mixtures of meat and milk are cooking, eating, and benefiting. So anything that we're going to learn is this is a biblical species of meat with a biblical species of milk, meaning that the mixture is under the biblical prohibition of Basar beChalav. It would automatically include these three prohibitions. We don't have to mention it every single time we're referring to a certain species. Once you know these category of species of food, of milk and meat are under biblical prohibition, you automatically know that these three prohibitions apply. Okay? Now, how do we derive this? From where do we learn that there's a prohibition of cooking, eating, and benefiting? So the Torah states 3 times that it is forbidden to cook meat with milk. Now Chazal ask, why the redundancy? I heard the first time. Why the redundancy? So because of the redundancy, we derive that God must be hinting to us something else other than just don't cook the kid in the mother's milk. So we learn that there is a cooking prohibition, and we learn that there is an eating prohibition, and we learn there's a benefiting prohibition. That's where it's learned from. Each one takes one puzzle. Now, the question that remains is, for what reason on earth does the Torah not just say it straight up? Don't cook, don't eat, and don't benefit. Why go through this whole repetitive and deduction? So we'll do this next week, but I'll conclude with a joke. Famous joke that goes, it's a grandmother's joke. I heard it from my grandmother. You probably heard it from your grandmother, so we'll reminisce together. The Jewish grandmother's joke, which goes as follows. How did it come about in the Jewish law, as we're going to learn in chapter 89, that it's forbidden to eat milk within 6 hours of eating meat? Moses went up to heaven for 40 days. God was trying to teach him some Torah. He said, Moses, don't cook the kid in the mother's milk. And Moses replied, you must mean that you're not allowed to cook chicken with milk, and even eat chicken with milk. So God says, Moses, no, I'll repeat. Do not cook the kid in its mother's milk. You must mean don't eat meat and milk on the same table. Moses, do not cook the kid in the mother's milk. That's the third time. And Moses says, aha, now I understand. Don't eat meat within 6 hours. Don't eat milk within 6 hours of meat. And God says, Moses, I give up. Have it your way. So that's a joke. What the drush is that we learn from each one of these is an issur of cooking, of eating, and benefiting. Next week we'll see in this slide why didn't the Torah say it explicitly, and that will open up to the inside of chapter 87. Okay, guys, there's no homework for this week. Okay, if you have questions, what we learned, you can address it in those that are enrolled. You can address it in the system, and I'll take care of it. And for next week we will start off when we left off in chapter 87. God willing.
Yeah. So we get our books.
The books were ordered. I don't have them yet.
Not every day.
Right. So as soon as they come in, we'll bring them. It's very hard to tell exactly when they will come in.
So this slide is up now, right?
This is.